Alright, let's jump right into our Lesson 3.1 video notes. Now, we did begin this lesson in class. We kind of talked about some of the big ideas at the beginning. Remember, there is a lot of vocabulary in this lesson, so hopefully you have already done that vocab in your vocab notebook, so these terms will be a little bit easier to understand. So once again, if you haven't done that, why don't you just go ahead and stop watching this video now until you've done the vocab like I asked you to. Alright? Alright. Let's get going. Okay, once again, here are your objectives. In the past, while we've talked about angle and line segment relationships in proving theorems, we're not doing the proof part yet. We are just going to look today at identifying relationships between two lines or two planes, like are they parallel or skew, like we talked about in class. And we're also going to look at angle pairs formed by two lines. Again, don't worry, we're not talking about the parallel part yet. Two lines and a transversal, and that's your new vocab word that we're going to look at in this video. So once again, here's that list of vocabulary. There's quite a lot, but you guys have done what you were supposed to, and you have already written down these vocabulary terms in your vocab notebook, so you should be good to go. Remember, we talked about what parallel lines are. They are coplanar lines that do not intersect. We talked about skew lines. They are lines that don't intersect but are not coplanar, and that's how they keep from being parallel. So skew lines are not parallel either, and they also don't intersect. And parallel planes are planes that do not intersect. Okay, once again, just want to briefly highlight this for you. This is how we would write it on paper to explain that two lines are parallel, and we read that as line JK is parallel to line M. So you read this as line JK is parallel to line LM. So we read it this way, and this is how we write it on paper. So here's the first example I want us to take care of. We want to identify parallel and skew relationships. So part A, I want you guys to name all the segments that would be parallel to BC. So we're looking for all the segments that are parallel to BC. So I'll highlight that for you. Here's segment BC. We want to name all segments that would be parallel. Okay, I'm going to give you time. If you want to pause the video and try this on your own, that's fine. Otherwise, these are the list we should come up with. All right, we don't want to say BC again because I've already used that as my reference. Any of these other four sides would be parallel to BC. Segment DA, segment GF, and segment HE. And those are the four that are parallel to BC. Part B, we want to name just one segment, name a segment that is skew to EH. So we want one that is skew to EH. Well, EH, or HE, depending on what you call it, is this segment. I want a skew segment, so it cannot be coplanar, so it can't be on a plane that touches that, and it will not intersect, and it's not going to be parallel. So I do not want to use any of these other three vertical segments, and I don't want to use any segments that would intersect EH, and so that really only leaves a few possibilities. I'm going to choose AB. You'll notice that segment AB is never going to intersect segment EH, even if we extend those lines completely, and it's not parallel. There are multiple other answers you could have given there. All right, part C, we want to name a plane that is parallel to ABG. ABG is this bottom plane, and so the parallel plane would be the top of the box. Now there are four reference points I could use. I only need three of them, and so I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, CDE. I'm going to say plane CDE. We could even say it is parallel to plane ABG. But that is the answer we're looking for. All right, so hopefully you understand what parallel planes and parallel lines and skew lines are. Now we're going to talk about what a transversal is. So here is the definition you should have for what a transversal is. A transversal is a line that intersects two or more coplanar lines at 2 points. So in this diagram we have two coplanar lines P and Q, And line T is the transversal. It intersects these two lines at two different points. So that's what a transversal is. Or you might see it like this in your diagram. Okay, and when we have a transversal that intersects these two other lines, we get points in the interior and points in the exterior, as we talked about in class. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 are in the interior. And 1, 2, 7, and 8 are in the exterior. All right. Now, when we get these points, we get 4 specific pairings, or 4 specific pairs of angles created by these two lines and a transversal. The first are considered the consecutive interior angles. The word consecutive means in order or next to each other, and then interior are angles between the two other lines. So consecutive interior angles are interior angles that lie on the same side of the transversal. Okay, you might also call these same side interior angles. So those would be pairs like 3 and 6 or 4 and 5. Those are the only two pairs of consecutive interior angles that I have. Then we have alternate interior angles, which again are the interior angles, but they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So angles like 3 and 5 are alternate interior angles, and 4 and 6 are alternate interior angles. And you also have alternate exterior angles, which are in the outside portions but are on opposite sides of the transversal, T again. So angle 1 and angle 7 are alternate exterior, and angle 2 and angle 8 are alternate exterior angles. And then lastly, we have corresponding angles. Corresponding lie on the same side of the transversal and on the same side of their respective lines P and Q. Corresponding, again, meaning in the same position. So we have many pairs of corresponding angles. Angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding angles. Angle 2 and angle 6 are corresponding angles. Angle 3 and angle 7 are corresponding. Angle 4 and angle 8 are corresponding. All right, so we have all those pairs we can take a look at. So you're going to want to make sure you can see this information as we do this next example. So in our example here, we want to identify whether these are alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, corresponding angles, or consecutive interior angles. And I'll use abbreviations for these. Alternate interior angles, or alternate exterior angles, or corresponding angles, or consecutive interior angles. So let's look at these angles one pair at a time. First, let's look at angles 2 and 6. Angles 2 and 6, angle 2 is formed by these two, angle 6 is formed by these two. Now, line C here is your transversal. And so they are both on the same side of the transversal, and they're both to the right of these other two lines. So those are the same sides of the other lines. So these are corresponding angles. Same side of the transversal and same side of the other two lines. Now let's look at angles 1 and 7. Angle 1 and angle 7. Angle 1 is formed by these two segments, angle 7 by these two. 1 is below the transversal, 7 is above. So they are on opposite sides of the transversal, so they have to be an alternate interior or alternate exterior. And 1 and 7 are in the exterior of the two lines, so they are alternate exterior angles. I want you guys to try and come up with the names for angles 3 and 8 and then angles 3 and 5. If you need more time, pause the video, Otherwise, these are the answers you should get. Angles 3 and 8 are on the same side of the transversal. They're both above the transversal C, and they're both interior angles, so we can call those consecutive interior angles. And angles 3 and 5 are on alternate or opposite sides of the transversal, but they're interior angles, so they are alternate interior angles. All right, now, the only difference in this example and the next example is that I have connected all three lines, and so depending on which angles we're talking about, the transversal could be any one of the three angles. And so the first thing you have to do here is identify the transversal, because the transversal is what tells you what angle pairs you're going to end up using, but then the angle pairs you're using here, the numbers, also help you identify the transversal. And the easy way to identify which line in fact is the transversal is to look at the vertex of each angle. The vertex of angle 1 and the vertex of angle 3 have to be on the transversal. So whichever line goes through both angles, vertices, is your transversal. So here's how we can do this. We're going to look at angles 1 and 3 first. All right, angle 1 has a vertex here, angle 3 has a vertex here. Those two vertices, those 2 points, lie on line L. So line L is the vertex. I'm sorry, is the transversal. Transversal is L. Then you can look at angles 1 and 3 and realize they are both below the transversal. So they're on the same side of the transversal. And they are both to the left of the other two lines. So they're in the same position with respect to the transversal and the other two lines. These are considered corresponding angles. Okay. Part B refers to angles 2 and 6. So we're going to identify those angles. 2 and 6. Here are their vertices. Both of these points, both these angles, are on line N. So line N is the transversal because both angles share line N. They're both on line N. So that's your transversal. Now, angle 2 and angle 6 are on opposite sides of the transversal, so they are alternate angles, and they're both between the other two lines. They're on the inside portions of these other two lines, so they're alternate interior angles. Okay. Once again, I want you to take some time to try and figure out parts C and D. Pause the video so you get enough time to do that. But first, start by identifying the transversal. Look at what two vertices have in common. Look at the side that is shared by both angles first. Alright, if you need more time, pause the video. Otherwise, these are your answers. Angles 4 and 6 share line M. Line M goes through both vertices of the angles, so they would have transversal M. And then, since they are on opposite sides of the transversal and both exterior angles, they're alternate exterior angles. And since angles 2 and 5 both have vertices on line N, that makes the transversal line N, and they are both on the same side of that transversal and interior angles, so they are consecutive interior angles. Alright, that concludes our notes over this lesson in class on Friday. We're going to have a little bit more time to try and figure out these angle pairs and what transversals are and those kinds of things. This lesson will kind of tie back into another lesson later on, so it's important that we get the information figured out now. And so if you have any more questions, come see me either before school on Friday or during class we can talk about it. But that concludes these examples for this lesson.